I'm not in my rig, as you can see. I'm away for the weekend, so I will not be on track. But that's boring. Less of that. Welcome, Aris.
Hello, Grid Finder, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here, and we don't buy that you are not happy to be on your rig because we are all suffering the hot summer in Europe, and you are somewhere in Scotland, and in the fresh and everything. So just don't say those things. That's not nice.
Yeah,
He's
it has
in a
rained
nice, cool
solidly.
room.
It's rained solidly for 3 days here because Scotland. So I'm feeling pretty good. But I am jealous because the track and the car that we've picked for this week, or that our communities have picked this week, is incredible. I'm a bit gutted, but swings and roundabouts. But we have a lot to discuss, Aris. We have a lot to discuss. We have a million questions for you, and this was one of those episodes where before every episode, we always reach out to like our Discords and social media, and we say, "This is our guest. If you have any questions, let us know." And we always get questions, which is great. But in this particular occasion, we get a lot of questions because people have a lot of questions about, the game, how it's built, how it works, what it's like to work building these games that we all love. So it's going to be a good episode.
Yeah, a lot of the guests we've had so far have just been like content creators and racers just like us. Or, of course, Tom, he got to go into the Alpine actual F1 factory. That episode was released this morning. If you want to hear that, that's pretty cool. But this one is particularly cool for me because I'm also a developer as well. Of course, I do online software, not anything cool like sim racing, but I'm just so curious into how all of this comes together in the end because, we're those people that in the end, if something doesn't react correctly, we go, oh, well, that car's garbage. But you actually had to program it, figure out how to make the real world synchronize with the sim world. So we'll get into a lot of that. But one thing that we kind of wanted to hear the story of is how did you go from college I'm assuming you went for software development or computer programming of some sort, right? How did you go from that? And then all of a sudden now you're working at Kunos and making some of the most intricate software like I can personally think of. How did that journey happen?
Well, first of all, life is strange, as you might know by now, probably. And I have nothing to do in my student years with software development or engineering, cars engineering, or something like that. Because actually, I went from Greece to Italy to study medicine. And yeah, and somewhere around the 5th year, I was like, no, I cannot stand this. I don't like it because my passion was always cars and computer graphics. And you know how life is. I've started to do some part-time work for multimedia software house and interior design architectural studio. And it was nice and I loved it. And so at some point, I had to tell my parents that, what, there's no medicine for me in the future. And, Greek tragedy and everything like that. But I just followed my passion and slowly, year after year, I tried to work towards getting into the automotive industry by doing multimedia stuff and things like that. And in the meantime, I was very interested in sim racing, as always. And I tried to start, doing some mods on the physics. And many things happened.
Okay.
Many things happened. I was always into the Italian community and also the more global sim racing community. I had the opportunity to work with the Simbin guys, with Stefano Casillo on the first Netcar. At some point, it just happened that me and Stefano and Marco came more together, and we decided that they actually showed me the first alpha version of Assetto Corsa back then. They didn't told me what it was. They just told me, no, we want you to come over at Rome and drive something new. So I drove this Formula One, and I was like, oh my god, this is completely new. Well, it feels so different. In the meantime, I was doing the Power and Glory mod for the GTR2 platform, which was a massive full total mod change of the GTR2 game with vintage cars. And we decided to start collaborating more and more and more. I worked with the team on the latest update, on the last updates of Netcar Pro. I worked with the team for the Ferrari Virtual Academy. And then we decided to start working together properly, and we started working on what was to be Assetto Corsa 1.
Wow.
And the rest is history. You know the rest, more or less.
Right. Well, that's interesting. So when your Twitter bio, very short and succinct, says vehicle dynamics at Kunos, right? Or at Assetto Corsa, I believe it says, actually. So when you say vehicle dynamics, what do you mean by vehicle dynamics? So is it the aero? Is it, just the UI for adjustments? Is it obviously, I wouldn't assume it's the tire model. What does vehicle dynamics mean in summary?
Yeah, sorry. It's everything, practically. So what it means is that my job is to understand how a car works, being from the tires to the aero to the suspension to the chassis to the electronics, everything. Work together with the physics developer, because actually the first thing we have to say is that I am not a programmer, I'm not a coder, I'm more of a scripter. You could say I'm more of a modder, right?
Okay.
But with the years, obviously, my job became something more than just a modder. So what I do is understand how the car works in every single detail. Grab all the data from the manufacturer, from measurements that I might have to do, from telemetry for my testings on the car, and so on. And then discuss with the physics programmer. Initially, it was obviously Stefano Casillo, this the godlike developer that unfortunately is not anymore with us. And now it's Fernando Barbarossa, which is an amazing software engineer with great background in vehicle simulation as well. Great guy. So I talked with him, and this is obviously for something new. So if I have found something new, a new feature on a car, usually electronics or something that we are not simulating properly in the aerodynamics or something like that, we talk together. We try to find out the scientific papers, documentation, real life telemetry, and so on. And we try to implement that into mathematics and code into our physics engine. And once that is implemented, obviously it is implemented in a way that then I can feed it data into it. And so my job then becomes, okay, get the data that you have grabbed and managed to find out and feed into the simulator, double verify that whatever we have done gives out a telemetry that is similar to the real telemetry, double verify that it also is similar to the driving expectations that I want to have from the car, and keep on doing that until you're happy. We're never happy, and it is a work that keeps on going. You improve step by step, small steps every time. You find something new, you put it in, you improve. You might find something that is not simulated, so you try to again implement it, and so on. So that's what I mainly do. I find the information, I try to get as much experience as I can, discuss, implement together, and then feed the data and double verify that everything works.
That's
decently.
Amazing. That's amazing, because they're two seemingly unrelated things. Like, obviously the virtual world, you're trying to mimic what's happening in the real world, and the only real metric you have is the telemetry at the end looking the same.
Yeah, well,
That's
we tend to do a couple of things. One is obviously we need to know if there are any scientific, data or papers that can help us to implement this kind of thing. And once we have this implemented inside the sim, which is not easy, but also relatively straightforward. You get, the mathematical equations, you put them in, and then maybe you try to optimize them. But usually you just put them in and see what happens. Then you get out the telemetry and see if it works properly. Now, here's the problem. All simulators or simulators out there have a lot of black magic, as we say. What that means? It means that there are many things in reality that we don't know how they work. Tires, aerodynamics up to a point, vibrations. And by not knowing how they work, I don't mean just us, the developers, but many times also the manufacturers. The tire manufacturers do not know everything there is about the tires. So there is a lot of black magic. And that black magic means, depending on your experience that you have through the years, you know what to expect from some things. Okay. And when you get the results and they do not satisfy you, you have a little bit of margin to go back and forth and try to see if by moving the values into that small range, we're not talking, completely change everything.
Right.
If the things get better depending on your experience or not. You also ask the real drivers, you also ask the real engineers, and it's that's why we're not yet there. It's still
Okay.
step by step, trying to get closer to reality as usual.
That's interesting. Are there moments where you're making everything match, let's say 1-to-1 with the telemetry, and it looks fine, but it just feels off in the simulator? So you actually fudge it into a realm where it's not supposed to be, and then it starts to feel real again? Would you
This is something
messing with things and just making it so that it works and feels good in sim, even though the numbers aren't really 1-to-1 matching?
This is something we are in our motto inside Kunos. We do not do, never.
Okay.
If we put in the numbers and the thing is not feeling good, okay, that's an indicator that we are doing something wrong, very wrong, okay, and that means that we have to search and research better to find out where the error is, because it's evident that there is an error somewhere.
Right, and it can be 100 different places, I would assume.
Exactly. The problem is that at least this is something that I've learned personally, and the whole Kunos team learned from Stefano. The moment you start to tweak values to make it feel better, it's not simulation anymore. It
Okay.
becomes arcade. Okay, it feels nice, it feels better. Let's stick with that. No, you're not going to do that.
Well, that
So
brings up an
really,
interesting point, because Tom, remember Lawrence's episode where we were talking about the power of force feedback, right? And a lot of us will have the DD1 or DD2. Those are the ones I have experience with, where it's a ton of force fighting back on you. But that's not really how a car works. Like when you're in a car, it's not like you're making a left turn on a freeway and you're like, oh man, it's really hard to hold in place. You're just kind of casually driving with two fingers. But we in the simulation world, for some reason, we jump into that, oh, it's got to fight back on me and like throw me out of my chair. That's realistic. So that's what brought up the question of like, do you ever fudge the numbers a little bit and push them into a almost non-realistic world just so that sim racing, I'm doing a lot of air quotes here, feels more realistic? That's interesting.
it's the first feedback thing is one of those most talked about things in sim racing, and Kunos has always been a little bit in the middle of a fight with that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we tend to try to not give extra sliders for the force feedback.
Okay.
So this is the problem. This is an actual real issue. Driving is like a language, So your brain has to understand the inputs and then react to those inputs. And in reality, your brain gets lots of inputs from visually, obviously, from audio, from your hands, and from the body. From the body, exactly. G-forces are very important. Vibrations in the body are very important. So your brain knows more or less what is going to happen in real life. So you get your brain, you put it behind a monitor, which might be fantastic, but it's still, bidimensional, or even if it's VR, it's still not the same thing. And you eliminate all G-forces.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now if you put the proper physics from the tires and from the suspension, the force feedback from the car should be relatively muted. The feedback from the steering wheel, when you go over a curb or over a bump, it should never, move around like crazy. That is not happening in real life, because if it happens, it means that your suspension is not working properly, or it's not designed properly, because what the real engineers are doing is give the opportunity to the driver to be extremely precise. Okay, so what you want to do is that, okay, I'm steering at 10 degrees, I'm going over the curb. You don't want the steering wheel to move around like crazy.
Throw your hands back and forth. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is something actually you can do in real life with your normal street car. If you get your normal street car and you go into a bumpy road and you just keep your steering wheel with just one finger, you will see that your body moves around and you feel a lot of vibrations, but actually the steering wheel does not move around, really. It just stays there. Okay. Why? Because, modern engineers know what to do in the suspension geometry in order to avoid the so-called bump steer. So,
well, I can't even imagine if people's steering wheels were going back.
Exactly.
It'd be a wreck on the roads out there.
Absolutely. So you go into the sim and you simulate everything correctly, and the steering wheel doesn't move. But your brain waits for vibrations, movements, something, and there's nothing here to help you except the steering wheel. And so two different schools are formed. We are from the school that say, no, simulation has to be simulation. Your steering wheel has to give you just the exact information that the actual car should give you. Yeah. And the rest, slowly, your brain will understand the new language. That's it.
Okay.
The other school says, well, no, we will add some extra effects to make your steering wheel move a little bit around. So that will give you extra information of what the car does. And so on. Which
so you can retrain your brain into, this is what I need to do because my suspension's bouncing my hands. But that's only because that developer decided that's how you're going to know something's going on with your car.
Exactly that.
Okay.
What's the issue for us with this? The problem is that when you add the extra sliders and the extra effects, you don't have objectivity anymore. It becomes something subjective. Mm-hmm. Someone might want the steering wheel to be like this. Someone might want it to be less. Someone might want it to be, stronger, and so on. And so, first of all, we cannot teach people, okay, this car should be like that, and the difference with this other car is so big because they have differences in their suspension. A vintage car from a modern car, whatever. And then we cannot teach people that, when you go over that bump into that circuit, you're going to expect this kind of movement and this kind of change in the behavior of the car. And then possibly, if you have the opportunity to go to the real world, you're going to find pretty much the same exact thing on your steering wheel. So everything becomes subjective. And that means, okay, who's right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you anymore.
Well, this is...
Yeah, sure.
This is an interesting conversation that we had with Jem Hepworth. She came on the show a few weeks ago. We were discussing how if you're in a real car, you have to set up the car for the track, right? And that's kind of it. You set up the car for the particular track you're on, and then you tweak it, and then you're set. Whereas with sim racing, there's so many things that you have to set up, and they all combine with each other. So you would set up your car for the particular track in the sim, but then you might also change the settings within the sim, so Assetto Corsa's own settings. But then some people will say, well, actually, Assetto Corsa reacts like this versus, say, iRacing that reacts like that. So make sure you also change your wheel settings. And then others will say, and actually your brakes as well, because your brakes, they have different linear scales. So you should probably be putting on a harder spring on your brake. And this is all now, we are now so far removed from actual motorsport. So I suppose this Kunos method, if you like, of trying to remove the amount of sliders in the settings, in some ways makes it more realistic. Although I can only imagine the number of people you've had saying, no, if it's simulation, then we need more settings.
Yeah. I can never say that this makes it more realistic or not. It's a different approach. It's our approach, and I cannot tell you if it makes it more realistic because there are very capable people out there that do something a little bit differently than that, and everybody can learn from everybody. So honestly, it would be too unmodest to say oh yeah, we're doing it right. Who knows? What I can tell you is that I can give you the same setup on the same car in the same conditions, okay? And you might tell me, oh, this setup is oversteery, for example. It's an alien setup. It's too much oversteery. I cannot handle. And I can switch a little bit, play a little bit with the damper on your wheel, and you will instantly say, oh, the car now is perfectly stable. And we haven't touched anything on the actual car handling characteristics. That gives you an idea how subjective feelings can change your opinion about how the car behaves.
It's so complex because it's so multi-layered, and it's almost like sim racing introduces more layers of complexity, which it can make it quite daunting. I remember when I first started sim racing, and I had AC and content manager, and I went to the settings and I saw all of these different options. And I was like, oh my God. And I just set up the wheel and I Googled what are the best wheel settings. And then I'd Google what are the best AC settings and blah, blah, blah. I thought it was all right. And then you read so many people's opinions, which is so vastly different from the previous one that you read, which was, the standard that everyone was going to use. It was quite difficult to work out, where do I start with all this?
Yeah, it's I did also in my live stream. We often talk about that. My personal idea is that the brain has to get used to whatever you're using, and one of the errors that sim racers are doing is they keep on trying to find out the perfect setting. Now, guess what? There is no perfect setting. There's no perfect setting.
The perfect setting is where you're a better racer. So it might be messing up the car settings completely, but the way that you drive the car, it fixes it for you. So that's your perfect setting. And then if, Tom was to come sit down on my setup and drive the car after I've put it together, he's like, what is this rubbish? This is not right at all.
That is very true. But the problem is that there is always someone faster than you.
Ugh.
And the moment that you see someone faster than you, you start tweaking again. So maybe, you start having doubts. So maybe my settings are not good.
Yeah.
So that's why the other guy is faster. So you start tweaking again. And the brain still goes into, unknown territories. And it's like, oh, now what do I have to do? I don't feel the car anymore. And you keep on tweaking. And the brain messes up. And at some point, it's like, oh, this is it. I don't like it anymore.
I've run into that with my Fanatec setup because inside their own software built into the wheel, you have 100 different things you can adjust. Well, not 100, but I'm exaggerating there. But then you try to adjust it because of some forum post that you've seen, and then you change your own setup, and you're like, I don't even know if this changed anything. I don't know what I'm feeling here. I'm just going off of someone else's perfect setup. And I agree because now I just go with the auto setup, which was the best thing that Fanatec ever did for me. ACC, I'm just like, yep, just configure it however you think is right because you know more than I do. I have no idea. Would you say that you have a distinct advantage when you're tweaking your settings? Since you are the vehicle dynamics person, you have if I put this to this number and that to that number, it's like the God mode.
Right. I wouldn't say it's the God mode because every single person has different expectations in terms of feedback. Feedback not only from the steering wheel but from everywhere else. My personal advantage, is that I'm very fast to customize myself into different things, and that's why I think I'm able to work fast into the sim because I jump from one car to another every single day, and it takes to be a little bit fast to get used to it. So what I've learned is if something works, don't change it because your brain is used to it. For example, I'm still using the old drivers on the Fanatec right now and the old firmware. I still haven't tried the new one. Why? Because I was working on the DLC and I didn't want to mess my brain with. now that the DLC is out, what I want to do is, finally install the new drivers, give myself like a week to acclimatize back to the new feelings that I'm gonna get, and then once I'm okay, that works good enough, not perfect, good enough, I will stop tweaking. I will do nothing at all. I will keep on, driving for another week or so, and at the end of the week, your brain gets used to it, and okay, this is fine. You don't have to change it anymore.
Well, that's the smart way to do things, because if you change one variable, you can identify whether or not that variable had a negative or a positive impact on you. So that makes complete sense. I am guilty when I'm making adjustments on the cars in games. I'm like, oh, let's change this and that, and then I'm like, well, I messed something up, but I don't know which setting was the key to messing all of this up. So I definitely need to adopt that strategy as well. Now, me and Tom have talked about this before, where we need to devote more time into tweaking our cars and putting our cars together, because Tom over here, he cheats a little bit and he gets setups from other people when we're racing against each other. He'll just, message our sim racing team, hey guys, give me a perfect setup for this track in this car, and then all of a sudden he's super fast.
Well, I mean, the temptation is real. With our sim racing team is fantastic. Tristan is an incredible engineer. So if Chris and I go do some laps, I'm just like, if I message Tristan and ask him how to really tweak this RSS Formula One car for Imola, it's gonna make a difference, and it does. It makes a huge difference. And then it will be about 5 laps from the end of the session where I'm like, well, that new setup really worked for me. And Chris is like, what?
Yeah, I'm like, all I did is change the fuel. Like, that's it.
Yeah,
especially with very complex car. You also the complex the car it is, the more the setup will make a difference.
Yeah, I pretty much have always just run on vanilla, and then I'll adjust the tire temperature or the tire pressures based on whether or not I can get them up to temperature or not. And that's about as far as I go in the adjustments there, just because, I don't know, I just don't feel comfortable that I would be able to identify and fix anything that I mess up whatsoever.
I also think it's probably the case for 70 to 80% of sim racers that they will find more time just by getting better at driving than they will by doing their setups, which, has got to be the more fun way of doing it too, right? If I have limited amounts of time each week to race, and I'm like, okay, when I'm racing, obviously I want to get faster. I can either spend a load of time in a setup or loads of time just doing more and more laps. The laps are always going to win.
Right.
Practice will give you seconds. Setup will give you tenths of seconds. So
very true. Very true.
So
go ahead, Tom.
Oh, sorry. I was going to just move us on a little bit and ask about your streaming. So, as a game developer and a streamer of your game, you must have been quite conscious when you were making that decision when you started streaming. It's like, right, do I start streaming myself race? There must have been this thing of like, I am going to be kind of putting a bit of a target on my back, because all of those people in the forums can now be like, now I can do this live.
It's almost like walking on coals. It is the comparison for me. Like,
there are a couple of things, that well, first of all, I can perfectly agree with you that there have been many times, because development doesn't always goes perfect, and many times you do things and the game ends being buggy, and so you have to deal with it, because unfortunately in development, and I'm sure Chris knows that much better than me, time needed to correct bugs or to find them or to put out fixes is always long. There's nothing like, okay, instant fix for something. So that you have maybe a bug, and that there is no easy fix, and so you have to endure and reassure maybe the people, or you might not even know if you can fix it or not. So there have been many times that I'm about to do the live stream and I'm like, why? Why should I do this right now? But it has been very surprising for me. First of all, while, as I said, there have been many times that I was very frustrated to start the stream. At the end of the stream, almost, I can tell you, 99% of the times, I'm happy and more relaxed at the end of the stream. So that tells a lot of how mature the community is.
Nice.
And how they can, just give you a little bit of a slack and let you enjoy yourself and the game and the rest of the community. And that's very important.
Yeah.
And it also says how the trolls out there or the aggressive people out there don't really have the courage to come to a live stream and talk to you directly.
Yeah,
And that tells a lot that they just good at going in and leaving some harsh comment into a forum and then disappear.
Yeah, I was just about to say that exact same thing. That's got to be a huge element of it. Of somebody, if maybe somebody, has a grievance with it, and they're like, right, I can see that Aris is streaming. I'm going to jump into the stream and I'm going to tell him. And then as soon as they see that you're a real person, just enjoying your evening off, having some fun on the sim, and maybe you're already talking about the bug, and I've had a really long day today because I'm trying to work really hard to fix this bug. Maybe there's an element of being like, you know what? Let's be a bit more constructive. I bet the feedback that you get on your stream is far more constructive than just a kind of faceless comment on a forum.
Yeah, it's always surprising. I mean, I'm still waiting for the mega aggressive guy to come into the stream and start insulting. Never happened until now.
It's just
I had
button
one
click
or
away.
two banned, and that was it. But we're talking about, I don't know, now we're not 35,000 people subscribers, and I mean, I can recall one or two guys like that.
That's a good ratio right there.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
well, I hate to cut the conversation off, but we have to get into the server before practice ends. So, Tom, you're going to still be able to interview and focus on the questions part so you can distract Aris, and I can pass him on the track. Please do. But I'm going to jump into the server now and start to throw some laps together, Aris, if you want to jump in there as well.
Yep.
And then also, if any of the listeners out there want to join in and you're not signed in quite yet, you can find all of the information in the description of the YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, just hop on over to Gridfinder TV on YouTube and get in there. We still have 15 available slots, so there's plenty of slots available. But yeah, I'm going to start getting set up and everything. So, Tom, you take over for the time being.
Okay, I've just put in the link in the chat if anybody wants to join us. It's a link to our Discord, and then on the Discord there's a Sim Sundays channel that has the link to the server, etc. So, Aris, I have a question about the whole. You mentioned earlier a phrase which I shuddered at because it's a conversation that I've seen many times, and sometimes it goes well and sometimes it goes bad. But I'm going to roll the dice, and you kind of made that comparison of simulator versus arcade. Now, on Gridfinder, we have a huge number of people that love the Formula One game. So I think we have nearly 1,000 communities now that race Formula One listing on Gridfinder. So, and the Formula One game has been accused of being an arcade, or some people use that word simcade because it's trying to be a simulator. I always wonder with Assetto Corsa, was it when it was 2014 it was launched, was it set out to be a simulator first and then kind of entertainment, something enjoyable second? Was it always destined to be a simulator, or was it like, let's work towards simulation, but ultimately this is going to be a game for entertainment?
Right. No, for us, first of all, Assetto Corsa started its life as a simulator for professional work for some business clients. And then slowly we try to, make a user interface around it and make somehow a game. By game, I mean a racing game. So you can, do your laps, do your lap times, do a race, put an AI inside, multiplayer, and so on. And for us, there was never ever a question mark about should we try to go into something more easy. It was always full hardcore simulator. And there are two reasons about that. First of all, we think that real life driving is extremely fun. We know it. We do it ourselves. Modesty apart, we have some experience, some wide experience. Me, Stefano, Marco, other colleagues inside Kunos as well now. So for us, it's always, driving your car or a racing car, whatever, into a track is a very nice and very fun experience. So if you do simulation properly, it's going to be fun. Difficult, frustrating, maybe, hard, whatever, but it's going to be fun. And that means also that, even if you're losing control, you need to understand, okay, why I've lost control, what happened. Which, if you go back in time, you will always find this into our titles. Every time you're losing control in Assetto Corsa, Netcar Pro, even Assetto Corsa Competizione, you always have an idea of, okay, what did I do wrong? Which is pretty much the same as what is happening in real life. So for us, it was always full hardcore simulation. And if we do it right, it's going to be fun. The second thing is that as years went through, it turned out to also be our great advantage into the market. We always had great graphics. We always had amazing sounds now with Assetto Corsa Competizione. We had good gameplay, let's call it like that. Nothing incredible. I mean, we are not Gran Turismo, we are not Forza Horizon, whatever. We are actually very happy when people are doing comparison with those giants. But our advantage against those games is our physics, okay? And the fact that we can also bring almost as good graphics as them and even better sounds sometimes. And we can bring a good gameplay for the racers. So trying to take our advantage and make it easier, it's going to be a death sentence for Kunos, actually. That's how we see it. So it will never happen. We actually don't know how to do it. So, I mean, I give you an example. Grand Theft Auto has one of the most enjoyable arcade physics driving cars with anything. You can use, I don't know, your nose to steer the car and it's still enjoyable. Yeah, I'm talking about the nose because, you can see the advantage here. So, and it will still be enjoyable and it will still feel like driving a car. Honestly, I don't know how to replicate something like that. I wouldn't be able to do it. So my advantage is do as good physics as possible. And if I do my job correctly, then it's going to be fun also for the people to drive it.
Right. And that is definitely, I think, the USP for Assetto Corsa, right? I mean, that is basically whenever. So I actually came into sim racing, I think, relatively recently. I think it's about 2.5 years ago, and I remember looking up, just Googling top 10 simulators or top 5 simulators, or trying to work out where I wanted to start. And obviously, the Gran Turismos and Forzas always came up, and you said you can use your wheel and your pedals with them. And I thought, okay, well, that's good because they're names I've heard of. They seemed safe. But I remember that Assetto Corsa consistently came up as being noted for its physics. And that interested me because I thought, in my mind, it kind of elevated it above that game status. It almost felt like something more worthwhile to dedicate my time to because I'm not. Maybe this is just a subconscious thing. Maybe this is my own problem. But like the idea of playing games in your evenings, as opposed to engaging with a simulator, feels more like a worthwhile hobby than simply just gaming. I don't know. Maybe that's just the way I kind of phrase it in my own head. Maybe that's how I justify the hours I spend on my sim. But I don't know. It feels like going for the title simulator versus game. It almost makes it kind of. I subconsciously thought esport hobby. This is something worthwhile to spend my time getting better at, and something you could be proud of being good at.
Right. Well, the game industry. This is something that the younger generations now realize, and the old generations have troubles and issues with that still. And by older generations, I mean people my age. So the game industry now has a bigger revenue than film and music together. It's a massive phenomenon in the lives of people. And while it's great to, game and have fun and whatever, as with films and as with music, you get something light and easy, and you get more difficult things that need more effort to understand, to enjoy, to whatever. For me, doing something that asks a little bit extra effort from the gamer, and can also tell people that might not like games or might be doubtful about games or whatever. You know what? There's not just wasting your time. There is also stuff you can do in gaming that it's also educative or interesting. You can learn things even if you're not good, whatever. It's quite important, I think. And yeah, I mean, it is important to be able to say there is also entertainment, not just wasting time into something fun.
Yeah, because I mean, I suppose ultimately you can't complete sim racing, right? If you play, I don't know, what was the last game I played? Probably Red Dead Redemption, right? You can play it and then you can do a certain number of hours. You can do the storylines, but you can complete it. And I suppose open world they kind of combat that a little bit, but still there is a storyline which you can complete. Sim racing, you can never complete it. So there is never going to be a point where Assetto Corsa becomes redundant because you never completed it. Like there is no such thing. So I suppose you must see that with the kind of the user behaviors, right? People spending more time more regularly for years on a game as opposed to a big spike at launch and then maybe when a DLC comes out. Or I mean, how do you see it from your end? Do you see like consistency or are there spikes?
There is consistency because sim racing is not just the play. It's not just the game. It's much more wider. It has much more depth. One of the things that I always love to say about sim racing is that sim racers are the most and best informed fans of motorsport in the world. Because they understand much better what it means to race, what it means to drive. You have people watching Formula One and then come back to you and say, well, they stay seated for 1 hour. Why do they get out of the car, so drenched and tired? I mean, driving is not hard. And that is a very obviously exaggerated example, but there are some people saying this. But you also have, I mean, even the journalists, the broadcasters, sometimes they do some incredibly strange comments and errors during the races because they don't have the experience of what it means to be behind a wheel and actually race. So I'm very confident that we will see from the next generation as it moves forward and becomes broadcasters, becomes journalists, and we have already many examples of sim racers becoming broadcasters in official real racing, or journalists actually. They get a much better understanding of what is happening. And they have more respect for the sport, they have more respect for the drivers, for the engineers, all that stuff. Luckily, we might see even less clickbait, but I've lost all hope about that. So I don't know.
Thanks, Netflix. Yeah, I am definitely in that camp as well. So I can distinctly remember, and I know the purists will hate this, but I there was a time where I hated Formula One, and I would have, and I guarantee I would have said that horrible phrase. There's just cars going around in circles. I don't understand why it's so interesting. And then I played Formula One 2011 or 2012, whichever one it was, on a PlayStation or an Xbox. I can't remember. And all of a sudden, I started to learn the tracks and you start to learn the cars and you start to learn that corners are characters in this story and each corner has its own different characteristics. And then when you watch a race again, you're like, oh, that overtake, how did he do it there? That's not a place to overtake. That's incredible. And you have this whole new appreciation because you're at this point, I wouldn't say I was a sim racer. I was just gaming Formula One. But you get my point, right?
Yes, absolutely. I absolutely agree 100%. I mean, I couldn't have said it better.
So I always ask this question, and I'm intrigued to hear your answer as somebody who's kind of building these simulators. But I've asked this question to a few people now, and I've said, if you could fast forward sim racing 5 years, okay, and now you're in this world of sim racing in 5 years' time, what's the biggest difference that you're noticing between today and then?
I think we will see more and more real racers inside our races, real engineers, and I still believe that as usual, we will be looking at 5 years old simulators, and we will be almost laughing about how not accurate they were. To give you a very simple example, when Assetto Corsa went out and through the years of its development, we were the first in the industry to implement things like active aerodynamics, active differentials, active electronics, proper electronics, not assists, active rear steering, stuff like that, and it was like, oh my God, amazing. And now people are, I can see around in forums, they are playing Assetto Corsa 1 because it still has an amazing following and amazing mod capabilities and everything. And they are like, well, yeah, the physics are basics in comparison to modern simulators, but it's still very enjoyable, very nice. And I'm like, well, yes, up to a point, they are correct. So you see how we move on. And I believe the same will happen after 5 or 10 years for Competizione, for example, or whatever version, iRacing goes from here to the future, or whatever version Air Factor 2 goes from here to the future. It's always the same thing. We keep on doing more and more going forward.
I always wonder about the mods because, no doubt. Well, okay, I say no doubt. Maybe this is just my own personal opinion, but AC seems to have had a very long run of being super popular, and perhaps it's partly because of the modding culture. Because you can go and race whatever, and there's whole companies that are set up selling mods for the game, right? But I wonder, especially now after this episode, where you've told us so much about the intricacies of how you develop a car in the game and how you make it interact with its surroundings, and how you kind of get all of you were saying that you get all the manuals and the documentation for the car, and then you put those numbers into the simulator to see what comes out. If Assetto Corsa is largely about mods now, how much can we trust that those mods are going through the same processes that your cars are going through? And are we playing an Assetto Corsa that isn't realizing its full potential because everyone's using mods which perhaps don't use the same intricate models that you would use?
There are two sides of the same coin. I truly believe there are modders out there that they're doing some outstanding job with the physics as well, possibly and almost surely better than what we did back in the times on the official cars of Assetto Corsa. So by all means, those guys keep on, pushing the level up. And unfortunately, there are many modders that they are doing bad job out there. Not only in the physics, but also reaping, content from other sims and so on, and they are asking money for it. And that is really bad. This is one of the worst things that has happened into the community, especially because, unfortunately, the community is not mature enough to say, you know what, you are doing shitty job and you're asking money, and we will just, talk bad about you, and we will make you slowly go away because you won't find any any green grass for you to keep on doing what you're doing. And unfortunately, this, as I said, is not happening. On top of that, you also have people without much experience. They go into a bad mode. They see that the car has extra grip, so they can drive it, and they applaud it like, "Oh, this has perfect physics because I feel so much."
Can drive it.
Yeah, I can drive it.
Yeah, because I'm such a pro race driver. If I can drive it, it must be
fantastic. Yeah. So that's the bad aspect of modding. But This is pretty much what is happening in real life everywhere in society. Every single part of society works
Right.
like that. You have that bad aspect, you have the good aspect. So, uh, bitching about it, sorry, makes me an old man, but it is what it is. This is how society goes on. And if you don't have one part, you can't have the other one, and
Right.
vice versa. So
Yeah.
it is what it is.
But equally, there's some incredibly valuable mods, right? So I suppose it's not so much a mod in the sense that we've been talking about it, but Content Manager. Loads of people use Content Manager, and it's easy to load mods into the game. Like, do you ever, as Kunos, do you ever sit around and look through things like Content Manager and other mods and overlays and things, and think, oh, we can learn this. We can use this for, say, AC2 or for an update, or for how much do you look to the modding community for inspiration?
We do look to the modding community. We don't say I can use it this or that, because it's also dangerous, because we are a business and they are not,
Yeah.
If we really need something, then we will contact directly and see if we can do it together. Or sometimes it has happened. Those people came in and worked with us as colleagues. I know, though, that Stefano has often helped the guy from content manager, and they work together to give even more information on how to do some things. So by all means, it is supported up to a point. So yeah, I mean, that's how it works, actually. In the meantime, I will also try to do some laps, because I see that we have only 6 minutes in qualifying.
Yes, sorry. This
And I'm about to start.
wasn't
Keep it going, Tom. Keep distracting him.
that wasn't some kind of clandestine plan. Chris, how's it going? Tell us about the track.
Oh, I'm struggling. I've already hit the wall a couple times, but it's mostly because I look up to see what's going on with you guys, and then I'm like, oh, right, braking. My bad. But there's a lot of fast people on the track right now. There's a lot of fast people.
Yeah, I'm going to need to...
knocking on the back door right behind me. I'm like, just go, just go.
I'll have to balance out my questions as best I can, just so that it's not all it's not all on Aris.
If you guys see number 15, just assume that I'm going to panic because you're behind me.
Aris, that's a great choice of racing number. Is that always your racing number? Why did you choose 42?
It's the answer to life, the universe, and Simracing.
No, it's also the racing number that we use in the Gridfinder Enduro car team. So I don't know if you've seen it.
Nice.
We raced the little 4KA in an endurance series in the UK. So we've raced Donington, Cadwell Park, and Snetterton so far, and our number is 42.
You see, everything comes together.
I know, it's beautiful, beautiful synergy. So you're driving the Lamborghini,
right?
And I think you're the only one. Why the Lamborghini?
The people in my Discord channel actually chose it. We did a couple of live streams with different cars, and in the end I just asked them, okay guys, which one would you like me to drive? They said, go for the Lamborghini, and here I am.
Nice. The challenge with ACC, well, I'm assuming there must have been some challenge with ACC, because you're using mainly GT3 cars, you've got the GT4 cars and the Cup cars, but they're all very similar, right? So with Assetto Corsa, you have the Formula cars, and then you have some of the old classics, and then some V8s are in there, and I'm probably mixing up some kind of Kunos cars with some mod cars here, but there's a huge variety of different cars that you can drive on AC, whereas with ACC, they're all far more similar. So you must have had to really focus on, right, how do we give all of these cars character? How do we make it so that when you sit in the BMW, for example, you're going to feel a different experience to when you sit in the Lamborghini, albeit they're incredibly similar cars?
This is the moment where, focusing on realism and never, messing around with numbers, tweaking numbers to make it enjoyable, after all these years starts giving dividends. Because already in Assetto Corsa 1, instead of, trying to make something enjoyable, we just stick to the numbers, to the actual real numbers, and we would see that, the car do come out with a proper character, even though we done nothing different than just putting in the numbers. And this, of course, is even more evident in Assetto Corsa Competizione, because in the end you just put the numbers in, and if you have done your job properly, the character of the car will come out, and this is something that it always fills us with extreme joy. I mean, I know I'm a nerd, but I really enjoy this. When you put in the numbers and the car gets out with a specific character, bad or good, it's always very enjoyable to me.
Yeah, I bet, and it's I kind of felt I kind of experienced the complete opposite racing the classic cars. So I really like driving the old classic cars, especially the old Formula cars on Assetto Corsa. You get in them, even just like turning the wheel and coming out of the pits can be like a completely alien experience. If you've been in, I don't know, the Mazda, and then you go in one of the old historic Formula cars, and you put your foot down in the pits, and all of a sudden you're looking back at your pit box. And it's like, how did that happen?
Yeah, absolutely. This thing that, you know, the character of the car comes out, or, you know, also when you're starting pushing to the limits of a car, and you find out new things that you didn't know actually that were there. That's another fantastic thing. I really love it.
How much do the manufacturers get involved? And I imagine it varies, right, from manufacturer to manufacturer. But have you ever had an experience where you've got to kind of go and look around the real car, maybe do some laps, speak to the drivers? Like how involved do these manufacturers get?
The more time goes, you know, forward, and the more we get the manufacturers working with us. So, for example, at the start of Assetto Corsa, usually they will laugh at us and told us to go and play with the PlayStation or whatever. Mm-hmm. But nowadays, we get some amazing data from the manufacturers. Really fantastic input, and that helps a lot our job. And most importantly, it makes our job faster, practically. Which means that we can, you know, make more cars or make the cars more accurate. So that is really good.
And you err on the side of more accurate, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We can make the cars more accurate, and you know, when it's as I said, you know, there's always some black magic, and being able to talk to the driver and to the engineers, it's very important, because they give you some aspects of the car characteristics that normally you might not understand why they are there or why they are missing, for example. This is very important.
How many of these cars have you managed to drive for real?
The GT3 only one, because unfortunately, you know, with the full racing cars, it's very difficult to find someone crazy enough to let you drive. With street cars and some older vintage cars, it was much easier, and I've drove quite a lot of our street cars that we did for Assetto Corsa 1. But as I said, you know, also the fact that initially we had our offices in Vallelunga, that means that every time a team, Vallelunga is a racing track in Rome, Italy. Every time a team would be at the racing track for testing, we would just go downstairs from the offices and start talking with the engineers and the drivers, and just try to get as much feedback and, you know, make discussions about things that we didn't know much about. Tires, degradation, heating, brakes, stuff like that. And that, initially, you don't even know what to do with this kind of information, and slowly pieces of the puzzle gets put together and you start understanding what's going on, and it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that must be an incredibly cool part of the job, right? And yeah, I think as sim racing progresses and esports becomes more and more popular, and these manufacturers start to have their own esports teams, that sure, they're going to have more of a vested interest to be speaking to the developers, maybe to even get an insight themselves. So I expect there might even be a shift, right, from you going to the manufacturers saying, we'd love all this information to make our models better. I bet there's going to come to a point where they're going to be coming to you saying, we'd love some information on the sim so we can make our drivers faster.
Absolutely. This has happened already, actually, and it is quite incredible. Obviously, we have to say we are talking about a client series. So SRO GT3 is a client series, which means that the manufacturers make a car and then sell it to the clients. So it's not top secret developments everywhere. On the electronics, for example, we have more problems finding information. But for example, suspension geometry, dry gearbox, engine up to a point, we get very, very accurate data. Or often we have manufacturers just handing to us the technical manual of the car, so we get all the data possible and available to the clients as well. This doesn't mean that we get all the data available of the car. There are many things that only the manufacturer know or even doesn't know because it's not Formula One. Those manufacturers will not lose, months into, for example, the aero tunnels, the aerodynamic tunnels to understand what the aero of that car is doing. So there are still some points that the teams do not know, the drivers do not know, and we do not know. And this is where, tweaking up to a range, never whatever you want, you're not going to put strange values in it, but up to a point you can tweak a little bit and slightly modify either the performance or the handling characteristics of a car and so on.
Yeah, and at that point you're aiming for feeling, right? Because if there's going to be guesswork, you've got to be the feeling, and a lap time is the only thing you can aim for. If there's massive gaps in, not massive, but there are gaps in information.
Here's how it works, and then you can do with this information whatever you like. Whatever we get, and we know, for example, this is the number, this is the exact number that gets put into the simulation model and practically gets locked. I will never change this. If I know that's the number, I will never change it, okay? Whatever I don't know, what I'm going to do is that I will put into a range that I know maybe from other cars or from my experience what that value should be. Then I will start talking with engineers and drivers and try to understand how this aspect might change the characteristics of the car, all right? And from my driving, I will try to get closer. If I have also telemetry, this will also help. But telemetry can give you information up to a point because in the end, it will never give you information of the character of the car. It will give you information about the performance of the car, but not how it reaches that performance. So yeah, on that point, you have a little bit of, extra work to do.
That's incredibly cool. I mean, as a process, that must be incredibly rewarding. What would you say is the most interesting car you've developed?
The most interesting cars have to be some of the hybrid prototypes or some of the hypercars of the era, like the 918 and the Ferrari LaFerrari, stuff like that, because they had so many active electronic features on them, and they had all those strange hybrid systems working together, and active differentials and whatever. And you would change just a single thing somewhere because you had new data or whatever, and it would change the whole car, and you have to go through all the other values again. And the very interesting thing is that talking with the engineers of the real car will tell you that that was exactly the process they were going through developing the real car as well, because those cars became so complicated that
cool.
Everything that you were changing on those cars would affect somehow all the other systems. Extremely complicated cars, very complicated cars, and sometimes it's fascinating, but you also arrive to the point where keep it simple, stupid, because it becomes so difficult that sometimes you ask yourself, is it worthy?
Yeah. Well, Nick Gill is our CTO developer on Gridfinder, and he's just asked a really interesting question, which is: have any of the brands ever pushed back if, say, one of the cars was slower? So if nobody's using a car because it's not as fast as the others, do they ever get in touch and be like, guys, please,
Absolutely.
Make
Can we
our
get
car better.
Absolutely. I mean, they do this even if their car is winning. So
Oh.
yeah.
How do you react?
Huh?
How do you react? What's Kunos's policy on that?
Obviously, first thing is that you have to be absolutely respectful because it's true that they are giving you their data, and we can only thank them. That is absolutely true. But at some point, they became all of them so insistent, let's say, that I had to write an email where I put all of them in CC and told them, okay, now we'll start, adding 1/10 of a second performance to all the cars, so everybody is happy. But I have to tell you that after I'm finished, the grid will still be the same because all the cars will be just faster by 1 or 2/10 of a second. So it is what it is. So at some point, you have to do the same thing that happens also when they are complaining about the real balance of performance.
Yeah, there was the thing with McLaren this weekend, right?
Exactly. They will do the same thing. Sometimes they are right, sometimes they're not. It's a very competitive, as usual, situation, and everybody tries to gain a little bit extra, of performance. Always, all the time, every day.
Yeah. So Tristan, who is actually, I think, P2 in this race at the moment, P3, so he races for the Gridfinder team. He's asked an interesting question, which is kind of about finding extra performance. It's about when the community find hacks, and I can see from your face, my YouTube stream is behind that. I think you might have just started the race. So my YouTube stream is about 30 seconds behind, so you're still going nice and slow. Your eyes just went very, very wide. I was like, I'm asking this question into turn one, I can tell.
If you watch the Discord stream, it'll be better synced. I had to change too.
Okay, I'm going to have to do that because that would have been a very unfair time to ask that question. Okay, I'm going to head across.
Oh, man.
We're still alive somehow. I don't know how.
Everyone is going nuts. Oh, one person off to the right.
There we go. Oh, now it's getting interesting. Oh, the McLaren off. That looked like a Gridfinder car.
Oh.
That was Bogdan. Bogdan's off. No.
Oof.
Right. Find my question again now. So, Tristan, who is still P3 in the race up ahead, he's asked a question about people finding performance, but he's asking specifically about the community when they find hacks. Now, I'm sure there's something that's kind of motivated this question. But,
or if you drive off in the berm on the track for a bit.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that when people find these little hacks with cars that are kind of not true to life? Is that a hotfix situation, or is it a bit deeper than that? Do you have to kind of work out, do we need to fix this, or do we want to fix this?
It depends. First of all, the first thing we have to do is verify if the hack is actually a hack, if it's an actual exploit, or if it's just people thinking it is an exploit, but they could do something different in the setup and be just as fast. Because one of the things that you learn with experience is that in reality on the setups there is no rule of thumb. Everything that can make you faster is valid to do, and this is something actually that I've been told by a Dallara engineer from IndyCar. I asked him specifically, so do teams follow your setup indications for the cars? Because in IndyCar I think all or most of the chassis are Dallara chassis.
Yeah.
And he specifically told me that, oh my god, you're joking, right? They do everything and the opposite of everything every single time. And as long as the lap time is better, everything goes. So don't expect never to have something that, it should work like that, this is the only way. Everything goes. So the first thing we do is that when some people think that they have found an exploit, we try to understand if this exploit is something that really gives you a lot of extra performance, or if you could get this kind of performance also by a different setup or driving technique or whatever that doesn't use the exploit. Okay, so that's the first thing. Once we know that, all right, so this is actually an exploit that people can use to go faster, and it only works with this kind of settings, then we will try to see if it's a bug on our end, or if it needs big research in order to find something and implement in the physics to eliminate the exploit. The feelings from this are mixed. The first feeling is always, oh my god, now what? All right, because you are obviously still working on many things, and at some point you have to stop what you're working and go back to something like that, you know, and find a solution. And it's not always nice or enjoyable. The second feeling is, all right, that's very interesting, usually, and what happens in reality so that this exploit is not used in reality? Or, you know, well, what do you know? This thing actually is being used in reality, and it is a revelation. Because this also happens, you know? So, usually we are in a place now that we don't find big exploits that are bugs and are easily solved. Usually, and that's incredibly a good thing, we find exploits that they need a big physics redo or a big physics feature to be implemented to avoid the exploit. Which means that we are at a point right now that the physics engine is mature enough to not have bad problems, but needs, you know, more features to be implemented in a way, which is great. Sometimes you can do this during the life cycle of the product. Sometimes you need to wait for the next product or whatever because there's not enough time and not enough resources to do it. So yeah, sometimes you just need to, you know, raise your hand and say, not much I can do about that. We'll have to wait some years and see what we can do.
Right. So I suppose that brings me on to AC2, right? So everyone knows that AC2 is being developed. There must be like, there must be a huge process of evaluating what you've already got before deciding what you're going to build next. So how do you go through that process? Is, you know, when the, I would love to have been in the room when there's that first meeting, like, right, we're going to build AC2. What is AC2? What is it we particularly want to improve on, or what's going to be different? Like, how did that process happen?
Well, luckily for us, we are in a great place. I mean, for me at least, and my physics core developer, we're in a place that we are not really getting told, you know, skip that, use it for the next game or whatever.
Right.
We just keep on developing stuff, and at some point, you know, we can implement it into a current title, or if we arrive long, then it's going to be implemented on the next title. This is one of the great advantages working into a software house like Kunos that keeps on, you know, improving the titles during the life cycle of a title. Yeah. We also have the amazing advantage that our publisher let us do this. It's very important.
Oh, I'm just pausing because I'm watching you on the inside. Oh. Oof.
Ah.
Well,
rage.
Don't rage quit mid podcast. That would be a first. Chris, I hope we never have a guest who rage quits the whole podcast.
He just signs off instantly.
I'm not sure if it was my mistake or just a simple racing accident. Maybe you can see the replay afterwards.
Yeah, we'll have to have a little look at the replay at the end of that one. That was I wouldn't like to say. That's the thing with these racing incidents, right? And I suppose now that you've done a lot of streaming, you must have seen this, that racing incidents, it doesn't matter if it's quite clearly a racing incident, as in it could have gone either way. People are going to pick sides. People are going to pick sides. Say, especially, I suppose, as a streamer, it's probably nicer because people are probably more likely to say that it wasn't your fault, right?
Yeah, that is something that I really don't like it, to be honest, because many times we see people on streams, fans in the chat, being very supportive to their streamers, and that's not good. I mean, if someone makes a mistake, at least you should wait and respect what the stewards are saying.
Yeah.
You shouldn't, and as a streamer also, it's your responsibility to tell people, I don't know, it might have been my mistake, might have been a racing accident, might have been the mistake of the other guy. I'm not sure about it, because otherwise, if you are a very popular streamer and you say, oh, what the fuck are you doing? Obviously, people are going to get your side and are going to make life a misery for the stewards, which is not good.
Yeah. The streaming... I was going to say, you streaming fascinates me because it's such a rare thing to have such a close connection to, and I know you probably don't like, I don't know, perhaps kind of vocalizing this, saying that it's like, customer and provider, right? So you provide a product and then people use your product. So, oh, hang on, we're getting a replay. So looks like you're getting a bit of a slipstream. That is a beautiful livery, by the way. Slipstream down the straight, tucking in over to the right-hand side. You brake late onto the inside. Were you alongside? Ooh. I don't want to call it. I'd have to see that again. But somebody did like a last minute, like a swerve, almost like they lost it, as opposed to. Anyway, you can review that at the end. I don't want to call it. I am not qualified, and that is another thing: is that most people who comment on these things are not qualified to be calling it with any kind of level of authority. Yeah, that looked unfortunate. Oh, hello. I think we might have lost Aris here.
Connection. Oh shit! Guys, are you back?
No, he's back.
Oh
he's
yeah,
back.
yeah, we're back. We're just watching your.
Unfortunately, I've lost connection to the server. My connection issues keep on. I'm now here with lost connection to the server.
Ah, okay.
That
was a shame.
That's a shame. It was a great race.
That was looking good. Yeah, sorry about that.
Which means that it is about time for me to start searching for another provider because these things have been happening for quite a bit of a time.
Yeah, and I suppose as a streamer, there's nothing more stressful than having a dodgy internet connection, right?
Ugh.
Honestly, as a streamer, I don't care. I've lost the race. I was in 5th position. Who cares about the streams? Yeah.
Oh, Chris, it means we're going to have to just watch you, right? No pressure.
I was going into the pit so we could just discuss. Yeah.
Chris speeds through this pit lane. Chris, I have a question for you. Have we ever finished a race on Sim Sundays?
Have you and I ever? Well,
I'm not sure we
races. We finished the mini race, but we were in dead last, and we were fighting against each other in the mini race.
Yeah, we were having so much fun, though.
But in the mini race, we gave the people who won, we gave them the faster mini.
Oh, we didn't realize that the two minis weren't the same.
So we were in the slower mini, and most other people were in the faster.
This is why we can truly claim that we are sim racing enthusiasts, because we are definitely lovers of sim racing, but can't claim to be at a level any higher than that enthusiast bracket. And I'm perfectly happy being there.
I mean, I love myself some arcade sim racing. I definitely do, just because, I don't know, it's less stressful. When I get into servers like this, I was talking about it with Lawrence as well, when it's just like nervous the entire time. I'm white-knuckled, nervous. And anytime someone's behind me, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to mess it up, but I'm going to make them hit me, and it's going to be my fault. And
Yeah,
I don't know.
I always feel a lot of responsibility.
So did we cover a lot of the viewer questions since ours did lose connection? We'll let the race continue, of course.
Yeah.
But we can go into a little bit of the Q&A section so that the race participants can hear their
Yes,
questions
I was
answered.
just I was actually just teasing a question from Mark Raddenbury, whose question kind of alludes a little bit to AC2. So we were talking about AC2, and we were talking about the process that you go through to decide what it is you want to do in the next game. And at that point, collision happened.
Right. So, next title, because AC2 doesn't exist actually. So next title, how do we choose if we should go over to a next title or not? Well, first of all, Kuno Simulazioni is a business. And as a business, it has to stay healthy and keeps on making sales. So at some point, our good, founder, co-founder, and general manager and CEO, Marco Massaruto, who is extremely good with Excels and the business plans and stuff like that, he sees a decline or something. Okay, and that triggers the alert that okay, the title is probably getting old. All right, so he tries to understand: do we still manage to keep on going and doing DLCs and keep the title fresh also in terms of economics, or do we start planning something different? And at the moment this question comes, it also starts the discussion with the lead programmer, which right now is Alessandro Piva. Back then it was Stefano Casillo. And the discussion is, have we reached the limits of the title in terms of development, and we are suffering, improving it, bringing new features and so on, and so probably it makes sense to start from scratch again and do something different, or do we still keep on going? And it's like a Formula One car. Every year, Formula One teams brings a completely new design. And sometimes, you are wondering, why did you do that if last year's car was still winning and it was very competitive? And the answer is always that last year's made all the developments that they had in place and arrived to a point that they couldn't improve it anymore without starting over from scratch. So this is the same more or less with a game code. It arrives at a point that the code gets messed up and you cannot easily fix something without breaking something else, and so on and so on. If the sales start declining, the management also comes in, and all of those things comes together, and at some point you decide, you know what, maybe it's time to start doing something different. Sometimes, although now it gets less and less, common, because obviously we are a much bigger company. But sometimes it also arrives to a point that, you know what, I've had enough of this. I want to do something new. That also happens. So yeah, that's how the whole discussion starts. As I was telling you before that, in terms of physics, we are quite in a good position that we don't care much about it. So if we have a big breakthrough, like it has happened with Assetto Corsa 1, and it also has happened with Assetto Corsa Competizione going from 1.3 to 1.5 and 1.8 and so on. If we have a breakthrough in the physics, we just go in, release it. The development team that is doing the console code is gonna go crazy and insult us for years to come. But it is what it is, and we just move on.
So, for those that don't know, explain that relationship between PC and the console game. How does that work?
Well, PC, as you know, guys, we are releasing our products in the Steam platform. Steam is like a big app store with games. And Steam is extremely good at leaving the possibility to the developers to update anytime, whatever they want, how they want it. No, practically, it's like do something, ask questions later, and apologize even much later. That means that for a small development team like ours, who is also pretty anarchic on how we do code, we are not really following deadlines very carefully, or development guns like, oh, I found something new, all right, put it in, send it in. Who cares, if you destroy everything else. So for us, a platform like this is fantastic because we can release something and then we can keep on doing hot fixes like every day or even more times during the same day if needed. Consoles are a bit different. Consoles, you need to have ready your product and you need to send it for approval to the console manufacturer, so Sony or Microsoft. And it goes through lots of testing. And here's the issue. If it doesn't pass some of the things that it needs to pass, they have rules for some things, or for, heaven forbid, there is a crash or a bug, and they find that bug, even though they haven't finished the test, they close everything, they send it back to you, and they tell you, well, this game crashed in this situation. We don't know what's happening next. You might have even another bug, but they will tell you. They don't know.
Mhm.
And you have to go back again, fix it, and then resubmit. Now, you have to understand that for every submission, you need at least 1 week or 10 days, okay, to happen. On top of that, add also the time you need to fix the bug. And sometimes, unfortunately, us being us, you might have even more bugs. So you fix the bug, you put it on, they test, they go farther ahead, and they find another bug, close again back, and send it back again. And so weeks are accumulating like that. And that would have been fine, but there is a point that after a couple of submissions, the next one also cost money.
Mm.
So there are problems or problems of problems. So what a team like us can do? What we do is we put the PC version out first. We fix and hot fix all the little bugs and issues we can find. When we are finally relatively confident that the release is stable, then we get all that code and we pass it to the team that is doing the conversion. That team needs the time to get all that new stuff and convert it for the console. Hopefully they also do a great job. They send it for submission, and then maybe a bug finds out, and then you have to do it. So as you can see, weeks upon weeks, months are accumulating for something like that. It's not an easy progress. We are getting better, but not that good on that. So the blame first is on us to be able to release a code that is mature enough, and then the conversion software house also need to make a good job and make it in a way that the console testing goes through the submission process without problems.
Well, that was incredible insight into the what it's actually like on a practical basis to actually deal with these pushes. Because you see people like, when's the next push? When's the next push? Like,
Right.
why is it so far behind? I want this, I want that, as if it's just a case of just you're there, just having a cigar, be like, oh, all right, fine, blah, 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 there you go, and it's just completely at your whim for it to do these updates. And actually, there is a huge amount of process and hurdles to be navigated first.
It involves a lot of swearing and bad words, I can tell you that. And yeah, it's also, I mean, when you think of it out of the whole problematics and the stress of the release, you can understand why people complain, and sometimes you also complain quite strongly, and they are right. But this you can understand only when everything is fine and you just go a step backwards and you see everything in an objective way.
Mhm.
When you are into it and you are really, sweating and trying to make things work, and you have the whole world against you, even though you're doing your best. And this is something also I want to get back into, that the whole thing, doing your best. So at that point, you also have the community, talking bad about you, and it gets hard real fast, and it's difficult. But
So,
it is what it is, and you can never win. That's why usually you never see us commenting stuff like that.
well, with all the red tape for the console version, is there ever a time where you guys kind of wish you didn't dive into the console market and just kind of stuck with PC so that you could put out those daily hot fixes or even hourly hot fixes?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, especially when you are dealing with issues, you are like, why I'm doing that, but again, as we said, when things are somewhat calm, you can step back a little and think about it and see that you are actually having the best, or maybe the only hardcore racing sim title in consoles. And you see the whole enthusiasm of communities. And for example, we were talking before that mods is what keeping Assetto Corsa 1 alive, which is true up to a point, but not completely. Because if you see the bigger screen, you will see that the sales are pretty much equivalent still now between consoles and PC.
Okay.
And consoles have no modes whatsoever, but it still keep going as strong as the PC version. Which means that also the vanilla project is very good and very appreciated from the console community. So when you see that, and you also see, the business part of the thing, which is
Well,
in the end, what pays for our families, for our hobbies, for whatever, you see that in the end it's worth it. It's always worth it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that's got to be difficult also is in regards to bugs, and they send it back each time. You mentioned very casually that you have a conversion house, like there's another developer that's doing the conversion for you, right?
Yeah,
So
right now,
you
yes.
guys could have solid code, and then the conversion house could have a bug in their code, and then it's just one of those things where if you can't find something, then you kind of have to send it up the line, right?
It would have been actually it would be disrespectful to say this, and I'll explain you why. First of all, we are the ones doing the main code, and the main code is not perfect. It has issues. And when so those teams now that they work on Competizione, for example, they are doing an incredible job to be able to get a very, very complex piece of code and optimize it for a much, not much now with the modern consoles, but still a lower performance hardware than
Right.
a top-end PC. And they have to go through the code, through the graphics, through the models, through everything. Okay. And in the meantime, they are not Kunos, so they could just say, that's the best we can do, deal with it. But they don't.
Right.
They feel the passion and they try the best that they can to take another man's code and make it work, which is extremely difficult. So there is only respect we can have for those guys, honestly. And you know what? They are also in a very bad position, because when all things are great, everybody in the community is, yay, Kunos, you are the best.
Yep.
And when things are not so great, bad guys, they did the conversion, they're the worst.
You are the worst, right?
Yeah, and that's really is not good for them. And I think we are good people, and we feel very badly when this happens. So, and unfortunately, you don't even have much time to be able to help them. because you're still working on your projects.
Oh yeah.
And it's not like you can, give 100% of your attention to help those guys understand what the fuck we did with our code, on some occasions. On top of that, there are also situations where they have almost everything ready, and we come out and we say, "Oh, we did that differently. You have to change it again."
Oh,
I'm
I
like,
can imagine
seriously,
that.
guys, why? Yeah, so they don't have an easy job for sure.
Well, I mean, I guess I didn't mean to obviously call them out or anything, but I have done conversions before where it's like, oops, I didn't quite get it right. But I can imagine those meetings where they have a staff meeting, Tom, which we were talking about meetings a lot this week, and the other developers go, "Hey, we're ready to launch this product," and Kunos goes, "Wait, but there's more."
Yeah, and with us, it happens all the time. We are terrible at that. Terrible.
Well, you're always trying to improve the game. You're always trying to make the physics better or make something more interesting or more simulation like. So, it makes sense because if it wasn't a passion project, then you would just be like, "Oh yeah, we're done.
Yeah, for sure.
It's fine."
This is actually why it also hits more, in the feelings when you are getting bad comments from the community or review bombed for the better or the worse. Sometimes
Yeah.
they are not correct, sometimes they are correct. Because you are doing this for passion, I can assure you that pretty much everybody in Kunos it never does 9 to 5. I mean, 9 to 5 for us is who knows what that is.
Right.
It's just fix it, make it work somehow. That's how it works. And this brings me to what I was telling you before. And I believe this also happens pretty much with all simulators, software house in this job. What you guys see, it's not like some other software houses where they have some big titles, right? Now, I need to be very careful of how I express this because I don't want to get misunderstood. When you have thousands of developers and you have software titles, games that costs hundreds of millions of dollars, euros, whatever, and you have to get out in a certain deadline, the job of each of those developers is, yes, the best he can do, but also very well designed before that. So someone in the management who has, for example, development skills, picks a developer that knows that can make a specific single job they will assign to him, and he knows that he can make it in, I don't know, 1 month, let's say, all right? And you get assigned to do this, and you are running, because it's always a running thing, to finish your job in 1 month, and you know that you have only 1 month and it's not enough, so you cannot go over that and do extra stuff to make it better or worse. It is what it is. You have to finish it. It's almost like industry, production. And this is not because those guys are the bad guys and they work like that. It's because when you are dealing with such immense projects, and with so many people, if you don't organize everything like this, then it's simply not doable. It's not doable. When you have a software house like ours, which is 20, 30 people, whatever, you need to have the other kind of management. You need to pick very passionate people that even if they don't know initially how to solve a problem, they will go out of their way and work their asses out to simply find a solution and improve. Okay. And when the title goes out and they see another title doing something better, they will still keep on doing, after hours and see if I can improve their part of the job to make it better. So in such small teams, whatever you see and you play as a sim racer is the best possible outcome this team was able to do all the time. it's easy for a sim racer to ask for more, and rightfully so. So they will ask you to do this better, to do that better. Why don't you see what the other sim does and do it like that and whatever, But it's simply not possible. What you get is the best know-how that the team in this amount of time is able to deliver to you. And sometimes there is also the factor that it works. We shouldn't change it because it will ruin everything else and will break everything else. Because even for smaller teams like ours and relatively, I won't say small, but limited project like Assetto Corsa Competizione, for example. I mean, it's not cyberpunk. It's not, I don't know, whatever. It's still very, very complex code.
Oh, yeah.
It's still very, very complex project to deal with. And complex projects means that sometimes that there is an error or that something can be done better, but it's simply not possible in a normal time set on the code that you have already. It would be much easier, to start from scratch and do it properly. But at that point, you say, you know what, maybe we can do it on the next title.
Right. And that's
Yeah.
got to be a hard pill to swallow, just saying, oh, well, it's not really possible on the engine or the code base that we have at the moment. That's unfortunate because it's almost like this constant nagging, like scab that you keep picking at. And it's just bugging you because you know it's there, but there's not much you can do about it at the moment. I'd hate to cut us off, but we are running pretty long at this point. So, Aris, is there anything else that you'd like to share? You could share your stream links and your stream schedules and all that stuff with the communities out there.
Well, everybody knows where I stream and everything, so you can find all the information around the social media and stuff. I would like to thank you guys, Grid Finder, for everything you do, and most importantly, and it's not because I want to, seem to be nice. I really like to thank all the sim racing communities, organizers, legal stewards, broadcasters, and everything. They are the heart of what we do. They give value to what we do. They organize, the people around them. They make people happy by letting them enjoy the game they love, and they give extra value. And most importantly, what we've been doing, you guys you've been doing for years, and sim racers, and I would say 2 decades now, right, on the sim racing scene. When the pandemic happened, and at that point, the Real Motorsport said, you know what, we might need something to keep our sponsors happy. You guys, all you guys, everybody, every single, even the last sim racer that just went to a stream to watch, and make a number, you were ready for that, and you saw how mature and well organized the whole sim racing community is around all these titles. And those people from Real Motorsport found an incredibly big community ready to support them. And the end result of that is now they watch at our industry, at our ambient and communities with a little bit of a different eye. They are
Oh, yeah.
more interested to us, and they have a little bit more respect. Actually, certainly much more respect than before. So
Yeah.
again, thank you to everybody. It's really important.
Well, this might be a nice way to end then, because Mark Raddenbury, part of our Discord, has asked a question, and I kind of want to give the last word to him because the end of this question is fantastic. But I'm not going to read out the question because we've covered a lot of the question already. But he asked about tracks, about are we going to add Manny? What about the Mustang and Toyota GT4? He talks about the Nordschleife. He says he's asking questions about safety cars, virtual safety cars, and adding realism, blah, 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 blah. But then he finishes with this, which is, lastly, thanks for an amazing sim that has got me to where I am within the sim racing and the real life world. So there's just, you have so many people who, yes, they're asking for stuff, but equally, at the back of their minds, they're going, thank you so much, because what you've created is a huge part of their life. And I know Mark Raddenbury, has worked in real world motorsport because of sim racing, and a big part of that will be because of Assetto Corsa.
Imagine if we weren't lazy, guys. Just imagine what we could achieve. That's all you get. That's it.
Well,
Brilliant.
thank you so much for coming on the show. It's really interesting to see inside the world a little bit more of these games that we all enjoy so much. Please, when the next one comes out, let's reserve a space so that you can talk about the next version of Assetto Corsa on the show with us, and that would be an absolute dream for Tom and I to be able to be almost an exclusive with you. That would be awesome. Tom, what do you want to share? Any last things? And then I'm going to close it out for the day.
Nope. Thank you very much, Aris. Thanks for your time. If you're at Sim Racing Expo, we'll both see you there this year. And we nearly finished a race.
Nearly. This time I didn't get to take you out and throw you into a wall, unfortunately. But next time,
reserve that for next week.
I will be sure to do so. If you guys like F1 racing and also interacting with the community a little bit, go on over to gridfinder.com/gridrival. We run a fantasy league over there, and I've been nosediving in the standings, but I'm going to make some big adjustments to my team this week. If Ferrari would treat Charles any
why
good, then I would be doing much better because I still believe in him, so I keep him on my team. But we're sponsored by Track Racer, so obviously affiliate